crucial. So we all know that. So we'll explore hypothesis testing in Python. So our agenda will be, as I've shown, introduction, some key points of hypothesis testing, types of hypothesis tests. Then we'll see why Python. We'll see testing in Python, so setting up an environment and such things. We'll take an example, and we will discuss some real-world applications, then conclusion and references. So let's dive in. Introduction to hypothesis testing. So what is hypothesis testing? Hypothesis testing, in simple words, is nothing but checking our inferences about given data. So whenever we take in a data for research purposes, there are some inferences that are made by us on that data. So hypothesis testing is nothing but a statistical method which we use to infer or figure out our inferences or decisions are correct or not. So purpose is to figure out, to determine if there is any significant evidence to back our inferences. Or in this case, we'll get to the key points, null hypothesis or alternate hypothesis. So here are important key points. So the first two things are null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So null hypothesis is the default or the basic assumption that is already made on the data, and alternate hypothesis is something that negates the null hypothesis and something that we want to prove. So there are some, I have given an example, like null hypothesis could be there is no effect on, so let's say in medicine, when a particular drug has been made for a particular condition. So our null hypothesis could be there is no effect of this drug on this condition, and our alternative hypothesis could be there is an effect. So there are some other crucial things. Significance level. Significance level is nothing but just a minute, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. I'll continue. Significance level is a particular threshold that we determine to that we use to support our tests. So there are types of tests we can perform on data. So like t-test, z-test, and chi-squared test. So we use threshold as a significance level to check whether our data lies in the acceptance region. Okay, so there is also a p-value. P-value is nothing but the probability or the probability of the hypothesized mean is equal to or could be equal to the real mean. That's p-value. So low p-value usually indicates strong evidence against null hypothesis. So there are two types of errors: false positive, type 1 error. Type 1 error is usually called as alpha error. So it is when we reject null hypothesis when it is actually true. And the opposite is type 2 error, failing to reject null hypothesis. So we'll check that on the next slide. So here is the confusion matrix which we use to better explain the two types of errors. So we can see that there are two columns. First one is accepting null hypothesis, and second one is rejecting null hypothesis or accepting alternative hypothesis. And then there are two columns, two rows. So where null hypothesis is actually true, and in the next row is null hypothesis is false, actually false. So when it is true and we accept null hypothesis, it is a correct decision. And when we reject null hypothesis when it's actually true, then we encounter the first type of error, that is alpha error. Alpha error is the error that we researchers normally try to avoid as much as we can, because null hypothesis is our first basic assumption on data, and so we would like to stick to that as much as we can. And then there is the beta type error, type 2 error, when we accept null hypothesis when it is actually false. And the last one is when we reject null hypothesis when it is actually false. So that is the correct decision again. So alpha and beta errors are something that we always what do you say? We always get in our hypothesis testing, and so researchers have to make sure which where they want to stick. So in medicine, when we test drugs, when we do hypothesis testing on drugs, so data is collected, we usually want the drug to be as more effective for the particular condition as much as possible. So there we require minimum amount of alpha error as much as we can. But when where we are checking for a broader perspective fields, we want beta type error as low as we can. We cannot have both errors as low as we can, because here in the next slide I'll show that when we increase alpha error, when we decrease the significance for alpha, beta error rises, and so is similar to alpha. So whichever we try to decrease, the another one increases. So while we do researching, we need to create a particular significance level so that we could mitigate this alpha and beta errors as much as we can. So let's see why we need Python. Python is a coding language, as we all know, and we have all used Python in machine learning models and other programming coding things. So why Python? Because Python provides a rich and vibrant set of libraries where we can do statistical things. And as we know, hypothesis testing lies in statistics. Python is more suitable for such things. It is also very easy to use compared to other languages, other programming languages. And Python is very versatile, as it is greatly used by data scientists and statisticians. So Python's role in research, we all know that Python is mostly used for automative tasks as well, and researchers mostly use Python to interpret or to do statistical things. So types of hypothesis tests. So normally there are two types of hypothesis tests. One is parametric and other one is non-parametric. But there are other types as well, like one sample test, where one sample is taken and is compared to a known population mean. So in this type of test, we generally choose z-test or t-test. Then there is two sample test, where we compare mean or any measure of dispersion against both the groups, both the data sets. So there is also paired sample test, where comparing is done between the pairs, that is same group at different times. And there are non-parametric tests where we usually check where parameters are not used, that is numbers are not there. So for that, there are different kinds of tests, like chi-square test, Mann-Whitney U, and we in last lecture we studied the sign test. Those tests are also the types of hypothesis tests. Hypothesis testing in Python. So we'll now see what steps are there. So to do Python testing in Python, there are very simple 4 steps, which are general. We first define null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Then we choose the appropriate test for our data set. And then we calculate the test values and p-values. And then we interpret the results based on the significance level we have already defined. So setting up. We use these, I have used these 2 libraries, and there are other libraries as well, that like stats model. Then there is NumPy. But generally, SciPy is the most commonly used model, statistical library for doing hypothesis testing. So for loading or exploring dataset, we'll use pandas. Okay. So I have taken an example where there are 2 datasets, A1 and A2. So you can see the data. I have displayed it over here, and our null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, I've also displayed it here, which is mean of A1 is equal or similar to mean of A2, and alternative hypothesis is opposite to that, which is mean of A1 is similar to mean of A2. So because we are comparing 2 independent data sets, we'll use t-test. Okay. I'm so sorry, something's wrong with my PC. Okay. So we know the formula for t-test. It is mean 1 minus mean 2 upon the standard deviation. So what we do is we compare mean 1 by mean 2 by how far they are from the standard deviation. That's what this formula says. So I have displayed what the symbols mean also. So this is our example. I've performed it in Python. So for that, we are using t-test underscore independent indi to compute the t value and p value, and we have got the p value as 0.44 and t statistic value of minus 0.8. So p value 0.44 means that there is 44% probability that our alternate hypothesis could be wrong. So that is null hypothesis is correct. We'll see that in our next slide. Like this is the plot I have drawn. So the blue line indicates the normal distribution of A1, and red line indicates the normal distribution of A2. So we can see that although not equal, but the mean of A1 and A2 are quite similar. So understanding the result, t statistics, as I said, reflects the difference between the sample means relative to the variability in the data. So we use so by comparing the mean to the standard deviation of both the data groups, we get p-value, and p-value is nothing but the probability of our t-value being correct by supporting the null hypothesis. So if p-value is less than alpha, we generally reject null hypothesis. But if p-value is greater than or equal to alpha, we do not reject null hypothesis. That is, we accept null hypothesis. So if we took null hypothesis significance level of 0.05, that is 5%, then our null hypothesis is correct. And if we compare it to the stats table, we find that our critical value is 2.306. So our value, that t value, lies between minus 2.306 and 2.306. So therefore therefore null hypothesis is accepted. So like this, we can use Python to do hypothesis testing. We don't always need to check the stats table, but sometimes it is necessary. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. Real world applications. So there are many fields in which Python is generally used. So actually, when Python is used, when we want to customize few tests for our different type of data type, because most applications on internet are created for a general field of research. Python can be customized by the researchers very freely. So it is very versatile. So in medicine, quality control, marketing, where we are checking drugs or our strategies for particular strategies that are beyond the general idea. Python is very well suited for research-based things. So for in medicine, hypothesis testing is crucial in clinical trials. So to assess the effectiveness of new drugs. So for example, I've taken comparing the effectiveness of a new drug to a placebo. So like giving a new drug to a patient, and that will be the first data set, and another data set would be just a placebo. Like they have given a random neutral drug which doesn't do anything, and they'll compare the effectiveness of the new drug. Similarly, in quality control, in industries, hypothesis testing helps determine if the production process meets quality standards. So for example, if a batch of products meets required specifications. And in marketing as well, so like businesses use hypothesis testing to optimize marketing strategies. So they can test the impact of two different ad campaigns on sales, right? Finance, similar to marketing. Again, many new strategies, investment strategies are always created in finance and stock market things. So we can use hypothesis testing and use Python to test both these strategies, as well as in psychology. In psychology, researchers use hypothesis testing to study behavior and psychological patterns. So for instance, telling if a specific intervention reduces stress levels more effectively than another. There are many real world applications where hypothesis testing is done in general. And Python is more suited for general idea beyond the things that more UI based applications provide. So conclusion is hypothesis testing is a very powerful tool to make data driven decisions. Yeah, researchers very much require hypothesis testing to determine if their inferences are correct or not, and many of these tests are very crucial for doing the same. And our another conclusion is Python provides accessible libraries. We all knew that Python does provide access many new libraries, but there are other libraries that we need to what do you say explore, like stats models. Stat models provides very deep and in detailed functions for hypothesis testing. So like t-test I use SciPy. SciPy t-test ind, the function only gives t statistics and p-value, but stats models also give, you can also provide significance level to it, and it also tells if the hypothesis test, null hypothesis is correct or not. So we also understood the type 1 and type 2 errors and how it is important for correct interpretation of our results. Sorry, it's off results. So these are the few references I used. I used our RM book, and I used few other websites. I referred to other websites. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Any questions, student side? May you have not talked about the advantages and disadvantages of t-test.
Okay. So advantages, t-test. So yeah, t-test, there are two types of t-test. We can use t-test for a single data set and as well as when we are comparing two data sets. So advantages are that the t-test is can be used for both kinds of two sample and one sample test. That could be an advantage. And disadvantage, uh,
Yeah. So if I have small sample, which test I should refer to?
small sample, then t-test. I would recommend t-test or z-test could also be used, z or t-test.
So this is coming under parametric type of test, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have a larger sample and if the standard deviation is known to you, then you should go for t-test. Otherwise, z-test, where you have a requirement of having some small sample where you can calculate the standard deviation your side. So,
Okay.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
So come to the slide of application. Just open the slide.
Here it is.
Application.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So when you have your data in the normal deviation, in the finance also, if you are checking a new strategy, really impacts the revenue, where you can have your data in the normal deviation and accordingly, I mean, you can check whether these two samples are behaving the same or not by applying
Yes,
the
ma'am.
t-test. Right. Okay.
Right.
ठीक है. Ameya, you have to submit the code also. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I've
So that
actually
we will.
put that
Do you
link
have?
in the reference as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
will
Just
share it.
open that. Just open that collab link.
Okay, ma'am. I will share the screen.
Yeah, we will share all the code to the team so that all can refer this. Just a second. Hello. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And Ameya, what I'm expecting over here is that you should take a quite larger sample. So take, if you could get the larger sample, maybe the data set. Here you have taken only 5 values. So
5
make
values. Yes, ma'am.
तो increase कर तो data set. Okay.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and